When the galaxy spoke of the Elsari, they spoke of eternity. These beings were known as the keepers of the endless flame, timeless watchers who guided entire star systems with a serene, distant grace. They did not die, did not age, did not bend to the flow of years as lesser species did. Their crystalline cities glittered on worlds of blue fire and glass mountains. Their voices rang in harmonic choirs that echoed across vacuum, a sound so pure that even machines wept at its beauty. But perfection, as it often does, breeds pride, and pride attracts the eyes of jealous gods and vengeful stars. When the Devourers came, dark parasites of interstellar hunger, they brought storms of black lightning and seas of corrosive shadows that ate light itself. The Elsari stood in unison, weaving their light into shields and weapons of unimaginable power. Yet for all their might, they had forgotten how to truly fight. They believed they could not die, so they never learned the art of survival born from desperation. Their shields crumbled. Their immortal choir choked on silence. At the end, on the last floating citadel drifting above the collapsing homeworld, only one remained, a child named Tyran. Barely a century old, she was considered nothing more than an infant among her kind. Her eyes still shimmered with starlight not yet dulled by endless centuries. She watched her world drown in shadow, her small hands pressed against the transparent walls of her crystalline nursery, waiting for voices that would never return. It was then that a human ship, battered and scorched, emerged from the wreckage of the war-torn system. Captain Elias Monroe had arrived chasing a desperate, flickering distress signal. He should have turned back. No sane captain would steer into a dying system, into clouds of cosmic rot that chewed through hulls and minds alike. But humans, as the galaxy had learned, had hearts that burned brighter than any star and a stubbornness that bent the impossible. Elias found Tyran alone, curled under a collapsing arch of crystalline song conduits. She flinched at his approach, her body too weak to even flee. The moment their eyes met, her violet gaze wide with terror and wonder, Elias dropped his weapon and knelt. No words in her language could reach her. The Elsari only spoke through harmonic resonance, their speech more music than voice. But Elias had always carried an old guitar strapped to his back, an heirloom from Earth. On instinct, he pulled it out, his calloused fingers trembling as they touched the strings. At first, only a single note echoed through the broken hall. Then another. A gentle, stumbling melody, uncertain but alive. Tyran froze, her wide eyes tracking each vibration as though it were a living creature. He strummed slowly, weaving in simple chords, his low voice joining, rough, warm, human. Songs of old Earth drifted from his lips, lullabies about moonlit lakes and summer fields, ballads of love and loss and home. Tyran began to glow faintly, her flickering light stabilizing, the dark cracks in her crystalline skin fading as if drawn away by the warmth of his music. The sound seemed to seep into her very essence, rekindling something the Elsari had lost long before the Devourers ever arrived, the ability to feel beyond the cold perfection of eternity. Elias scooped her into his arms, still playing softly, and carried her through the collapsing citadel. Each note pushed away the shadows, a fragile shield against the Devourer's whispers that gnawed at the mind. As they fled to his ship, Tyran's tiny voice joined his song in shy, trembling echoes. When they finally broke orbit and the dying world vanished behind them, Elias collapsed into the pilot's chair, clutching her close. She looked up at him, blinking as though seeing color for the first time. She reached out, touching his face, rough skin, warm eyes, a heartbeat she could hear in every note. In that moment, she understood. On his ship, Elias taught her words, stumbling, awkward syllables at first. She learned son, home, safe, and his name, which she repeated over and over like a precious melody. As days turned into weeks, Tyran transformed. Her luminous glow no longer flickered. She began to laugh, a sound sharper and more crystalline than any human's, but bright and true. She would dance through the narrow halls while Elias played, her feet leaving faint shimmering trails as if the stars themselves wept behind her steps. Other survivors across the galaxy watched in wonder as this child, the last heir of the Elsari, stood beside a simple human captain on distant stations and refugee colonies. She began to sing, sometimes alone and sometimes with Elias, weaving together lost harmonies of her people with the raw warmth of human folk songs. Where her voice rang out, the broken felt whole, the hopeless remembered warmth. They called Elias foolish, called him a barbarian who dared to touch something so divine. But he simply shrugged, tuning his guitar with a crooked grin. She didn't need a god, he would say. She needed a dad, a friend, someone to remind her she was loved. Eventually, they settled on a green moon far beyond the old battle lines, building a small house beneath wide skies and wildflowers that grew as tall as Tyron herself. In the evenings, Elias would play his guitar on the porch, Tyron curled against his side, humming in a language that only they understood. She would rest her head on his shoulder and whisper, "Sing again, Elias. Please, it keeps the dark away." And he always did. Their empire had stood for eons, built on the idea that perfection was enough, that eternity was safety. But in the end, it was a single flawed human and his trembling song that saved the last light of a dying race, not through strength or power, but through warmth and the fragile miracle of connection. In every corner of the galaxy, children would someday hear the story of the immortal empire's fall, and the human who saved its final child with nothing but a guitar and an unbreakable heart. And in the hidden gardens of that distant moon, Tyron, no longer the last scion but a daughter, a singer, a dreamer, would grow beneath the stars, her voice rising in laughter that lit up the universe like a newborn sun.